You ask whether I think that Reformed Jewry has any special mission for the Jewish people and for the Gentile world of today. I suppose by Reformed Jewry you mean rather Reformed Judaism.
Reformed Judaism, yeah.
Has any special mission. And I would say that I think that it has, because I believe that it is distinctly a universal religion, a religion with a message for all mankind. It proclaims the truth of the one universal God of all mankind and of the life which we believe he has meant that all mankind shall live together. Now, we proclaim that truth in our religious teaching, in our doctrine, and as a people, we do, I believe, attempt to live that type of life as an example to the peoples of the rest of the world and as an influence in the religious and social life of mankind. In that sense, I believe that Judaism has a special mission for the Jewish people and for the Gentile world of today. It is not merely Reform Judaism. I must say that I do not like the term Reform Judaism, and that I use it as little as possible. In 1926, we had a convention, a meeting in London, led by Mr. Claude G. Montefiore, with Miss Lily Montague, an active participant, and a number of others. I myself participated in that convention, and we adopted the name Progressive Judaism. By that we mean a historic religion which lives in the present moment, and as life changes, as life progresses, as human knowledge expands, as the vision of God grows larger and larger, this religion progresses likewise. And this is what I conceive to be the true Judaism, the historic Judaism, the Judaism which has lived on through history and which I believe will continue to live on for the guidance and the blessing not only of the Jewish people itself, but of all mankind. Does that answer your question, or have you any specific questions to ask?
I would ask now, in addition to this answer, you'll emphasize, if you speak about the mission of progressive Judaism, you mean, of course, and you emphasize mainly the moral teachings of Judaism.
Not merely the moral teachings of Judaism, the worship of God by the Jewish people as taught by Judaism and as it has evolved through the course of Jewish history. I may say that when I speak of Judaism in America, I like to call it American Judaism. What I think you must create here in Israel is a positive Israeli Judaism. It will not differ too greatly from American Judaism or from British Judaism or Australian Judaism, the fundamental teachings will be the same, the historic background will be the same, the measure of inspiration which comes from history will be the same, but to the degree that the way of life in the different countries differs, to that extent Judaism in the different lands will, progressive Judaism in the different lands will differ. Judaism is essentially a religion of life, in contrast to Christianity, which is a religion of faith, of belief. Judaism is a religion of the life. Of the 10 Commandments, only one deals with matters of faith, namely the first commandment. All the other 9 deal with procedures of life, of human relations, of living, and so forth. And as life changes through the ages, so Judaism too must change. If when we contrast, for example, the manner in which Judaism expressed itself in the days when the temple stood, when sacrifice was the principal mode or principal medium of worship, with, let us say, Orthodox Judaism of today, the strictly Orthodox Judaism, we can see, even though the Orthodox Jews will not admit it, that Judaism has changed essentially, and it continues to change as life changes. We are standing today upon the threshold of a new age, the space age. Our grandchildren will have a much larger concept of the world, of God, of the meaning of life, and than we can possibly have today. And as their knowledge grows, as their vision expands, their concept of Judaism, of its message, of its way of divine worship, and the like, are likewise bound to change more or less. But it will be a steady, consistent, historic development. It will be one continuous movement, and that is what we call Judaism.
Yeah, I see. Now may I ask, regarding this main problem of development and so on, I remember reading in the conference the whole discussion, I think about 80 years ago, about the question of Sanhedrin and Rabbi Felsenthal's approach to the problem of dogma. Would you have to say something about the problem of dogma in Judaism?
Well, I would say that there are, of course, fundamental principles in Judaism. The belief in one God, the concept of mankind as one human brotherhood, all children of the one Father. That, in consequence, the moral relations based upon the concept of the equality of man, of justice, of truth, of cooperation, of the unity of mankind, those are the fundamental principles of life which God would have us live. And these were the principles proclaimed by the prophets, and which we seek to apply to our life today in relation to our fellow Jews and our fellow men.
Yeah, I see the point. Now it's clear to me. And perhaps we go to the other question.
What place do you think Israel should occupy in the life of the Jews in the diaspora, and particularly in the United States? Could it or should it become the spiritual center of world Jewry, as Achad Ha'am thought? My answer is very simple. If Israel can become the spiritual center of world Jewry, why certainly it should. If the Jewry in the United States can become the spiritual center of world Jewry, certainly it should. If Judaism in any land can play that role, it should. In other words, Jewry in every land in which Jews reside should develop to the utmost the potentialities of religious life, religious inspiration, religious influence that it possibly can. And if it should develop that in one particular country, be it Israel, or be it the United States, or be it any other land, the greatest influence, Jewish influence, is exerted upon our Jewish people and upon our fellow men, well, that will be the spiritual center of Judaism. Let each country, let Jewry in each country do its utmost to express and develop and build up a strong, living, vital, and inspiring Judaism, and exert the utmost influence it can.
Do you think that Israeli Jewry has, well, it's something that's difficult to answer, of course, has greater chances than any other Jewish group in the world to
Jewry in Israel?
To reach this stage?
I am not prepared to answer that question. It may be that the association of Jewish teaching, Jewish principle, Jewish religious expression and worship with Jewish national life may be a source of strength. It may well be.
But of course, it's difficult to know.
It's still too early to determine. Should it become so, we would all be very thankful. We would accept it gladly. But it remains to be seen.
Yeah.
But it is a worthy aspiration for Israeli Judaism to become the spiritual center of Jewish life in the world.
Because I'll say that maybe I'm a bit different to many of my friends in Israel, although I was born here in this country already. I see it only in one way, the justification, let us say, of the existence of the Jewish Israeli state is never to forget that it's only a part of the Jewish people throughout the world. Because you know probably there are people already, maybe only a minority at the moment, who think that Jews in Israel are somehow better, I'll put it in brackets, than others, because they live in their own country, and the Prime Minister is a Jew, and the President is a Jew, etc. And the policeman is a Jew. I'm very doubtful myself about this, and I don't think that that was really the main aim. But I would like, again, as I said, without knowing how and when, that Israel should become the center of the Jewish people. Let's connect it again with the famous Kimitzion Tetzeh Torah. So you, if I can say, put it this way, so you think that it is too early now to say or to think that I think that it can develop on these lines, although maybe it's preferable and it will be very good if it develops on these lines. Am I right if I try to say it in one sentence?
I'm not quite certain that I understand.
What I said is this: if it would be possible, were it possible that Israel should become the spiritual center of the Jewish people, it would be very good and accepted, as you said a minute ago. Do you think, from this stage on, that the Jewish people throughout the world should help the state of Israel to develop on these lines, that it should become the center, the spiritual center of the Jewish people?
Certainly I do, or let me put it this way. I think that the Jewish people throughout the world should help the Jewish community in Israel to develop as a spiritual, religious people to the utmost.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, whether that would make Israel the Jewish spiritual center of the world is another question.
Yeah, this I agree. This I see. I see the point.
But, and likewise, the Jewish religious community in Israel should help the Jews in the other lands.
Yeah, I mean it
develop
only on
their-
the way of exchange between the people.
Certainly.
I don't want to become some kind of closed community of the best
Yes,
people or so.
we must keep in mind the thought, the realization that we are all one people, regardless of in whatever land we dwell. We have a common past, a common tradition, a common vision of the future, a common hope, and perhaps even a common fate. And so we must work together, live together, and help each other in every way we possibly can, not, both materially and spiritually.
Yeah, that answers my question.
Good.
Excuse me just a minute. And let us come now to the first question.
My association with the Hebrew Union College began in 1894, when I was a boy of 13 years of age, had just been confirmed, and in those days, students could enter the Hebrew Union College when at the age of 13, when they were going to high school. They took their work at the college in conjunction with 4 years of high school and then 4 years at the University of Cincinnati. The course of study covered 8 years. I was already in my second year of high school when I entered the Hebrew Union College, and I studied there for 8 years. Dr. Wise died in 1900, and a year and a half before I was ordained. I was ordained as rabbi by Dr. Moses Melziner, who was a very inspiring man, a fine Talmudic scholar, and an excellent teacher. I studied abroad in Germany for 2 years, where I got my doctor's degree in the field of Semitic languages. Then, when I went back to the United States, I served as rabbi for 3 years in the little town of Lafayette, Indiana, And in 1907, I was called back to the college to teach. Dr. Kaufman Kohler was then the president of the college. I was assigned the task of teaching elementary Hebrew, Hebrew grammar, and Bible. Up to that time, I must confess frankly, I had not been a Bible student to any extent. My primary interests were in the field of Semitic languages. The earliest my earliest studies, my earliest published studies were likewise in the field of Semitic languages. But the longer I studied Bible, and the more deeply I penetrated into it and became familiar with its problems, the more I turned over to the field of Bible as my major field of interest. And after a time, I was appointed professor of Bible. And I taught to the best of my ability, and as I taught, I learned. I became aware of problems, and I sought to study them, to find solutions to the various problems, and so my vision expanded. And Dr. Kaufman Kohler resigned as president of the college in 1921, and I was elected president as his successor. And I continued to serve as president of the college from 1921 to 1947. I would have been expected to retire in 1949, 2 years later, because we had a rule in, and in fact I think the college has the rule still today, that a member of the faculty may retire at the age of 65. He must retire at the age of 68. But at that time, I was 66 years old, and I had had an attack of pneumonia, which left me rather weak, and the burdens of the office had become increasingly heavy, and my physician, who was likewise the chairman of the board of governors of the college, Dr. Hiram Weiss, who was here for the dedication of the building, advised me to retire, and so I did. Dr. Glick, who was elected as my successor, invited me to continue to teach. And this I did for some 12 years, teaching just graduate work. And then in 1959, my teaching ceased. I was connected with the faculty of the college as an active teacher for 52 years. And 26 of those years, half of that time, I served as president of the college. During my presidency, I likewise taught. I likewise conducted classes and seminars. Now that is the story of my connection with the college as a student, as a teacher, and as the president. Now, if there are any special questions you would wish to ask me with regard to that.
I started writing a question, I didn't finish it. I'll say it like this, mainly in the last period, because we won't have the time more. What were your main purpose in teaching when you were the president of the college, in teaching and in advising the future rabbis of America? What were your advisors to tell? main advice?
My general idea, my general plan was to present to the students of the college the understanding of Judaism as a religion which has developed through the course of history, or perhaps I should say, instead of developed, has evolved through the course of history, has grown broader, stronger, more understanding, and perhaps even more inspiring. And I think that we did accomplish something in that way. To a certain extent, I must say that the approach or some of the fundamental principles changed. Dr. Isaac M. Wise was essentially a great reformer. And it is interesting to note that he seldom spoke of our movement, even though he was the great pioneer. He seldom spoke of our movement by the name Reform Judaism. He called it American Judaism. He founded the Union not of Reformed Jewish congregations, the Union of American Hebrew Congregations. He founded the Central Conference not of Reformed rabbis, the Central Conference of American rabbis. His paper he called not the Reformed Israelite, but the American Israelite. And he advocated a true American Judaism. At the same time, even though he was quite a reformer, he was a child of his own age. He was definitely opposed to biblical criticism. And so his successor, Dr. Kohler, was more advanced in that respect, although he did not go the full way either. And of course I became, as the result of my own studies, a thorough biblical, what some might call biblical critic. I accepted the teachings of biblical science without any reservations whatever. I perhaps even added something to them and sought to work in that field and to pass that concept of the Bible on to my students, that they might interpret Judaism, beginning with the Bible itself and on through the ages, as a living and growing truth.